So with any luck, this won't be nearly as long. And so that's the other thing I've been doing for a while. And that's on Twitter. And so Twitter is sometimes referred to as microblogging because you only have 140 characters. So you really have to be brief. But to me, that's become almost as important as blogging. And I'll try to explain a little bit about why that is. Maybe even more important. So to give an example, so Twitter is the first thing I check in the morning when I get up. What's new on Twitter? So before email and things like that. And so basically, I don't know, you probably haven't been to conferences yet, but you've been to, information sessions and things like that with networking. But it's a little bit like, I tweet for the same reason, or I use Twitter for the same reason I go to conferences. Right? And so why do you go to conferences? Well, it's to learn first to learn what's new science, what's happening. So in a conference, right, who is doing work that people think is important enough to get half an hour to talk about it, right? So you see who people have selected, and then they give a brief overview of what they've done. And so that's sometimes what they talk about is things that haven't been published yet. So you sort of see where the field is going and maybe get some new ideas. So that happens because people on Twitter. That happens on Twitter because people share papers when they're published. Look, I published a new paper. Or look, I read this new paper that I didn't write. And if 2 or 3 people are tweeting about the same paper, then it might be worth looking at, right? Also, I can't go to all the conferences, but a lot of people have started live tweeting from the conferences, right? So now person X is talking, the title is this, and then during the talk, people will tweet what the most important thing is the person has said, right? So you could actually sit and follow at home what's being presented at a conference, right? And so without having to buy an airline ticket and get on the plane and miss the plane and then miss the bus to the hotel, and right? So it's very useful. And what are other reasons people go to conferences, right? Is to get the gossip, right? So not necessarily just about the science, but also sort of what's new otherwise. Announcements, so and so is moving to University of X. Oh, things like that. And of course, self-promotion, right? So people go to conferences to network and to tell other people about the science you're doing and try to convince them that it's important, right? And so that's also happening on Twitter, right? And also there's discussions and people voice their opinions on Twitter. So you can have long discussions on Twitter on different things and opinions. And opinions are actually really important, right? Because it's a little bit like, where do you publish, right? If people think you're not publishing where you should, that's their opinion, right? But that's important to you because they might sit and review a paper or a grant or something like that, right? So other people's opinions are important. If I'm sitting and writing a proposal and I propose I'm going to use this method for it, right? But someone on Twitter has said some, that it looks good in the article, but it never really works in practice, right? This is not something that's going to be in any paper ever, right? And it's probably not something that people are going to write a blog post about or anything like that, right? It's just something in passing that could be very interesting to you, especially if other people are writing, going, yeah, we tried it, it didn't work for us either. I don't know why the paper says it's so great, but right. So that is really important information that can save you years of trouble, right? Imagine trying to work with a method that's actually not working and figuring that out for yourself. Staying in touch, is also very important. So, I mean, you meet people at conferences and things like that, and there's some mutual interest and things like that, and you think, well, maybe I don't have time right now, but maybe in a year or so it'd be interesting to write a proposal with this person, right? Because they do something that I could use, and they, but how are you going to remember that 2 years from now when the other stuff is done and the call for the proposal is finally out and things like that? Well, just staying in touch, right? Maybe tweeting a paper to someone or just seeing their name, right, popping up sort of reminds me, oh yeah, now it's only half a year away and we really should start thinking about this proposal we're going to write together. Also meeting new people, that's also why you go to conferences, right? So people are doing some, I had no idea this person was doing this or who this person is, right? But that's actually pretty interesting. Or, this person is now an editor of this journal. I don't really know this person, in person, but we get along on Twitter, and I think she says some reasonable things about open access, so maybe I'll send my paper to that journal, right? Because she's sure to be the editor, and that might work out pretty well, right? So I've also I haven't written proposals with people I met on Twitter, but I've had letters of support for my proposal for people I've never met in real life. I met on Twitter, so like you get talking, and in the end they wrote a letter of support saying, if you get this money, you can send a student to my lab for a couple of months, right? Building network and community. So I'll get back to an example of that. But really, I mean, this Twitter really only works if you're interacting with a lot of other people, right? And so if the more they're sharing about something, the better, right? But people are only really going to share if they feel other people are getting some use out of it. And that's one thing. And the other thing, they're only really going to share if they feel other people can find it. And so you can do some interesting things with hashtags. I'll show you some examples of that. But that's actually a major issue with Twitter, because there's so much, right? So you can see I follow 500 people, and that's not close to the record, right? So if 500 people are tweeting every day, how do you not miss the important stuff? Also by building community, I said, well, so now I'm so used to getting a lot of my information about new papers and things like that on Twitter, right? But there are some people who are not on Twitter. And I would really love if there's on Twitter, if for no other reason than they could just let me know when they publish a new paper, right? So if you build a community, if you say, look, Professor X, there's a lot of people, so-and-so is on Twitter and so-and-so is on Twitter, why don't you come on Twitter? Because there's this community there, right? Then you get these people on board, and you can get a lot of interesting information. And then, of course, there's help and feedback. So, for example, a lot of software packages now have a Twitter account. And so that's, if I have a problem, I'll tweet them. I won't write them an email. I certainly won't call them on the phone, right? You tweet them. I mentioned this example with RT-Kit. So I have a software package, I'm trying to learn how to use it. It's kind of complicated. I wrote a blog post where I share some code, right? And then I just mentioned them, their Twitter handle in my tweet. That brought them to the blog post, right? That got me some feedback. But it's the same thing like, DSB, right? So the train is late, you tweet at DSB, they tweet back saying, yeah, we're sorry, it'll come here in half an hour, and then it doesn't. And finally, well, people also go to conferences to joke around with each other and get a little stress relief, which is actually pretty important. You shouldn't really, it's good to just laugh sometimes with the jobs we have. So again, so just some examples, right? So this is a guy This is an example of live tweeting. So this is from the American Chemical Society meeting in San Diego. And this guy does something very similar to one of the projects we're doing. And the session was on something really interesting. I would have really liked to be at this meeting, but couldn't. Right, and so now, for example, here's a guy called Maloney is talking, right? What is he talking about? Predicting poses of engineered dipeptides. Well, okay, that's kind of interesting to me. Right, this is really useful information to me, that it takes 1 microsecond of implicit solvent trajectory to extract the populations. That's really useful, right? And so this guy is very good, right? So during the half-hour talk, he'll maybe tweet 5 or 10 tweets that sort of give you a summary of the talk. It's really, really, really useful. Building networks and community. So I've been trying to, I didn't invent this hashtag, but I've been trying to promote it. So I'm a computational chemist, right? And so what I'm trying to get people to do is I would like to sort of see what's going on with computational chemistry. It may not all be of interest to me, but if it's about computational chemistry, I would at least like to get a look at it. So if you use a hashtag, right, CompChem, so this is about computational chemistry, right? So for example, here's a job opening where they're looking for a computational chemist. That's not super important to me right now, but maybe it's important for one of my students. I would just like to know, right? And so by labeling with a hashtag, right, you can click on this hashtag, and then you get everything that has this hashtag. So you get everything that's been tagged as being relevant for computational chemistry. Right? And so what I mean by network and community, right? So the more people who use this hashtag, the more useful the hashtag will be. Right? Because you can get, if everyone's using it, you can get pretty confident that you're not missing anything about computational chemistry on the web. On Twitter, I guess I should say. And then there are also tools. So there's this site here that you can set up, and this will go in and make sort of a little newspaper, and it'll pick everything that has tagged with computational chemistry, right? And make it into sort of a little newspaper form, and it'll come out every weekday. And it does this completely automatically. Okay, as long as it's labeled with the hashtag. So, I mean, there are some times where, you know, you're really busy and you can't check Twitter every day, right? But at least here you could go in and say, okay, on this day, what was happening in computational chemistry, and just sort of get a brief overview. So Twitter is a very good way, a very good spot of sharing a lot of information. Yeah, so yeah, more on the hashtag. So you can see other people have tried them. I started to pick up on it, right? So here's a journal, the Theoretical Chemistry Accounts, right? So they started using the hashtag. And other hashtags, you know, related to the chemistry, right? And then, you know, sort of I'll retweet that to get it out there. Okay. Right, so we got a new journal article coming out, another new journal article coming out, and a blog post coming out. Right, so very sort of effective way of sharing that. News announcements, self-promotion, feedback. So this is my tweets, right? So making a point about preprints. So preprints are, for example, when you submit a paper to a journal, before it's accepted, you know, you can put it up on things like Archive or other preprint servers so that it's available publicly available while it's being reviewed. And so I'm a big proponent of that. And so I'm, you know, trying to make a point here that my paper has been in review for 5 weeks, right? But it's a preprint, so people have already downloaded it, seen it 400 times and downloaded it 85 times. Right? So people are already using the research, even though it's still under peer review. So trying to make a point And here I'm sharing my reviews for another paper. Oh no, this is the same paper. So it finally came back after 5 weeks. And here are the reviews. Yeah, so this is another one. So it's a research project. I have to figure out how to write some code that does this. And so I write a little blog post explaining the problems, right? And I'm just looking for feedback. And I'm carbon copying 2 people who I know certainly has some expertise there and maybe have some ideas. Right? So of course I could also send this as an email to these 2 people, right? But in this way, these 2 people are alerted. They probably check Twitter before they check their email. And everyone else has seen it too. Right? So if other people have feedback to this, then they can go in on the blog post. And finally, joke, stress relief. So I always throw this up because if you're coding, if you're programming like me, then this is really, really funny, right? It's not funny to you because you're not coding, but it made me laugh, right? And I don't know of anywhere else but Twitter where people are sharing stupid jokes like this. That's kind of my point. So I think that's it. Yeah. Oh, well, so instead of doing this exercise, let's just, is anyone here on Twitter? No. So why not? Yeah?
I don't think we're there yet in our careers, maybe. We're not so specific yet. I don't know. And I feel like it will take them a lot of time.
Ah, okay. Well, so I mean, so there's lots of students on Twitter. I mean, there's also non-scientists. Yeah.
I just have a comment. I know a 15-year-old girl, she has a Twitter account. I think it's just, I don't know why. I don't have it, but I know that, you know, everybody can have it.
Yeah. So it's not for, and I mean, people also tweet about nothing to do with science, right? So news or cartoons or something like that. Yeah?
It's probably, the speed is very useful, but you can spend a lot.
Ah, okay.
So you
Time, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I can control myself. So.
Okay. Yeah. So it's the worry that this will actually, that it'd be too interesting. That it's too easy to waste time. Yeah.
I mean, I tried a few times to start getting into Twitter, but it's always so much, and the time I need to filter out what is interesting to me doesn't have to do with science, just anything. I would rather use that time and go to sources where So I know that Twitter is super useful if you know how to use it. But I just cannot get the use out of it.
Yeah. And that's right. I mean, that is the challenge with Twitter, is to keep it to a manageable level. Yeah. And so, yeah. So for example, so I work a lot. Who do I follow? Right. And so I'm at a point now. I follow 500 people, and so I'm sort of I can feel I'm at a point now where I can't have more followers because it's too much, right? And so, you know, I start looking, if I start following this person, well, I start thinking about, well, is there someone I should unfollow? Are they really, you know, contributing? So yeah, that's the part that takes time, is to find a collection of people that tweet something worthwhile, you could say.
But when I already have my sources, why would you say that I should go on Twitter anyways? Because I have like a few newspapers I follow, and maybe a news app on my phone.
Yeah.
And why would you say I should still use Twitter?
Because it's well, there are things. So, for example, when something publishes a new paper in research or something, that's not going to make the newspaper. So a lot of people, for example, follow journals. I mean, that's the only thing they follow. It's just the Twitter accounts on different journals, and you get a little, kind of like a table of content, except that now these journals will never tweet all the articles. So they'll pick some out, right, to tweet. So what you get from that is sort of a pre-selection right? So the journal chose these 5 this week. Maybe that's already saving me some time. Yeah. So, but it's true. I mean, it's in terms of news, there's probably not just regular news is probably not a huge advantage. The thing with Twitter is you can really if you sort of look at people at large, then science is kind of an unusual interest, right? And we're not interested in all of science, right? So let's say you're interested in neurotransmitters, right? That's a pretty select group of people, right? And so what Twitter can do is you can put a news stream just on neurotransmitter news. And there, I think Twitter is probably the only thing where you could really do that. Yeah. So I think that's the advantage, that you can build up a really specialized feed.
Can you also find a hashtag that is interesting for you and follow just the hashtag? Is that possible?
Well, you don't really follow a hashtag, but you can go in and just search for it, and then you'll just get. Yeah. So yeah.
What about Facebook? I use Facebook to searching news site.
Yeah. So I mean, there are science things on Facebook, but it's just, in my experience, it's happening on Twitter. But why do you think that is? Yeah.
Facebook, there's no limit in Facebook. Where Twitter will have 180.
140. Yeah, that's exactly I don't have a proof, but I think that's exactly the reason. It's you're forced to be brief, right? So if you have 500 people you follow or accounts, right? You just skim through, and maybe for every 100 tweets, right, there's something useful, right? But 100 tweets is not a lot if it's only 140 characters, right? But it's impossible on Facebook, for me, impossible on Facebook, right? Because everyone writes too much.
So you prefer Twitter?
Yes, to pick things out. Yes, and of course, 140 characters is that there's no detail, right? Then I have to go in and let's see if maybe there's a link to a paper, or maybe there's. But let's just say in Facebook, for example. In Twitter, you would get the title, right? On Facebook, you probably get the title and the abstract. And it's already, I can't read 100 of those to find the interesting stuff.
What about Google Plus?
Yeah, that's I use that. No one's using it, so it's a community problem. It was actually reasonably useful for a while, but since no one's using it, yeah, that's really. Yeah, yeah, and I was about to say unfortunately, but actually they did it. There's a lot of things about Google Plus that didn't into design and things like that. So Twitter has really become even though there are other options, it's really, from a science point of view, it's really happening on Twitter, and I think it's because because the tweets are short and it's easy to skim through a lot of information. Right, because our interests are so specialized, right, that 99% of it is actually not going to be useful. But finding that 1% is fairly easy on Twitter. If you think about who you follow and things like that.
I think I would be Twitter changed. I try to control myself.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, and I certainly started out this way, and this is as a lurker. So it means you just read. I didn't tweet for a long time. Right? You just read what other people tweet, and so you get it as a source of information, not really sharing something. And that's how most people start. So just because you're on Twitter doesn't mean like you have to tweet everything you do or tweet at all or anything like that. Right? But they're just eventually, once you've found your group that you follow and you're getting something interesting, eventually you just want to say something because it's, you know, it's interesting to you. Yeah. So did I have? That was probably on the other one. So, but it also applies to Twitter. So one question. So in this course, you're writing things. What are you writing right now? Grant application. Is this something you would share on Twitter or a blog?
Of course not.
Okay, why of course not?
It's my own grant application. I don't want to take my idea. Or they just steal my money.
Yeah, okay. So you don't want people to steal your ideas.
No.
Yeah.
Because I will not share my grant application. If it's a real application, no, it's not.
So would you share the
fake one? Yes.
You would? Are you?
Maybe.
Maybe?
After some year, I will. But no, no.
Yeah. So I share my grant applications, my real ones, when I send them in.
Why?
That's a good. Yeah. Why? What's the? I mean, the disadvantage is, right? People would steal it. But why? Can you think of any good idea? Yeah. Yeah. So other people see it and they learn how to write. Yeah. And if other people shared theirs, then I could learn from them. Yeah. Yeah.
Get feedback.
I could get feedback on it. What about the thing with stealing the ideas? I mean, you could argue that it's out there. So it's my idea. I was first.
Yeah, but you did it first. You can't prove that you have made this great application. That you have done that. This is your idea.
Yes, but it's okay. Some people might do it.
Yeah.
But that's not really stealing your idea.
Save your money.
I don't know. But it's okay. So okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
You said improve your idea.
Yeah.
Help you like develop it.
Yeah.
To get grant.
Yeah. But let's think about the stealing. Let's practical, right? So you send in a proposal, and it takes, let's say, 6 months to know whether I get the money or not, right? So are they going to be able to steal my idea in 6 months? Then I would say it's not a very good idea if you can do it in 6 months, right? And let's think about what actually has to happen for them to steal your idea, right? They read it, right? They know they have 6 months to steal your idea. They would have to drop everything, right? And start working on your idea. How likely is that? It's not very likely.
It's a good idea.
Then it's a really good idea. But if it only takes 6 months to do it.
Some people work seriously. Some people can work 24/7 non-stop.
That's true. Yeah. But I mean, most proposals, right? They're let's say a postdoc proposal or something, right? It's work that covers at least a year, maybe 2, right, to finish. If everything goes exactly as planned, right? No one is going to be able to do that in 6 months. If they are, then your proposal is not ambitious enough. So I'm trying to make a point. I mean, I'm not saying you have to share your proposals, but it's one of those things where it's worth thinking past your initial reaction, right? Because think about what would practically have to happen in order for for someone to steal my idea. And you figure out it's pretty unlikely. Right? Now, it's also pretty unlikely that you'll get good feedback on it. But it's more unlikely that someone's going to steal it. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing, though, is that they're not really They're not really stealing your idea.
You prove your idea.
Yeah, but it's your idea, right? And you've published it. I mean, it's out there, and you can prove that you had the idea first. Right? So then the question is, well, what's more important here? Is it having the idea or proving that the idea is correct?
Eller exclusive idea or exclusive.
Yeah.
For engineering is exclusive.
To actually do it. Yeah.
For science.
I would say it's the idea, right? For science. Yeah. I don't know.
But of course, there are a lot it can be discussed. Not discussion.
It's a long discussion, exactly. But what I'm saying is, it's not, at least to me, you may disagree, but it's not obviously a bad idea to share your proposal. Right? It's not a sort of a disaster of an idea necessarily. And there are some benefits, right? You establish precedents. It's the same reason people use preprints, right? Why put up a preprint before the paper is accepted? Right? But a lot of people do that, especially in physics and math. And so it's to establish precedent. You're the first with the idea. So it might take, if you submit to a lot of journals and wait, right? It could take a year to get published. Right? Someone could get the same idea independently, submit to another journal, and get published before you, and then you have no proof that you had the idea first. Right? So in physics, it's very common to, and math, it's very common to put it up as a preprint. In fact, some people have argued that in math and in many branches of physics, no one actually really reads the journal. I mean, it's important to get it into a journal because it's peer-reviewed and things like that, but the actual reading, I mean, what do people physically read is the preprint. So same thing might apply to the proposal. But sort of, all I'm doing is, or I'm asking is, maybe, so when you're writing stuff, think about maybe you should share it. Right? And so, the initial reactions, and I had the same one, is, think, well, people might steal the idea, or people are not really gonna find it interesting, or I'm not really sure that what I'm saying, what I've written is correct. Right? Can we think of any other excuses? What other reasons might there be not to put it up? I think my English is bad. But all of these have counter arguments. So with stealing the idea, well, if by putting it up, you're establishing that you had the idea and when. Right? If you're not really sure about what you write, well, then it's better to figure it out and get feedback on this before you submit the proposal. Right? Or if the English isn't good, it would be nice if someone checked the English, and right, because sending in a proposal for grammar and English mistakes is not good.
Do you share your presentation on Sweden public?
Yes.
All your presentation?
No. So the ones where I feel I can make the decision. Right? So if I write grant applications with others, then I won't, because they probably would not want me to. Right? Because it's not a very common thing to do. But if I feel, I've written the proposal, it's my words, then I share it. Yeah. Now, I don't share it before I submit it. Yeah. But the reason for that is because I always finish in the last minute. So it's, yeah. Ideally, I would like to share it a month before and get a lot of feedback and things like that. But, let's be realistic here. But that would be the ideal thing, right? And the final thing we talked about, well, no one will care about it anyway. No one will be interested in it, right? And that's what I'm telling you. You don't know. There are 7 billion people in the world, and it'll be interesting to one of them. I promise you. Right? They may not find it, right? But it's just, I've done this for many years now, and I've just found that it's impossible to predict what people will find useful. And so I'll leave with an example. So this is actually sort of one of the things that helped get me into blogging. And so I was living in the States. I lived in the States for 21 years. And so we were moving to Denmark. And we had 2 cats. And I had to figure out what to do with the paperwork to get the cats in Denmark. You know, what paperwork, what vaccinations, blah, blah, blah. And so we called our veterinary doctor, and I mean, she had no clue, because no one in Iowa of her customers had ever moved to Europe with 2 cats. Okay. And I didn't even bother to look, but there's no book in the library that you can check out that tells you how to move cats to Europe, right? So it's a pretty unique problem, right? But I Googled it, and some guy in America moved his cat to Sweden a few years earlier, and he wrote, it wasn't really a blog post, because when he wrote it, there wasn't really sort of blogs as such, but it was basically a blog post where he just outlined everything he did and included a PDF file with the office you should contact to get the paperwork done in every state, right? And it was just exactly what I needed. Okay, but there's no way that this guy could have anticipated that. I mean, how many people move their cats to Scandinavia? Right? But he just put it up there. I don't know why. And it was just incredibly useful for me. Right? But he wrote it maybe 6 years ago. So I was probably the only one who ever really used that, right? And it took 6 years before someone found it really useful. But when it happened, it was incredibly useful. I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't found that blog post. No, I really should have. I was so busy with the move, but I can't find it anymore. So I really should have sent him an email. I mean, I'm still, yeah, I really should have, because it really, that was, I don't know what else. I didn't know how to find this information. So you never know. You just never know. And you can say, well, okay, I'll show you. I'll put it up. And yes, 2 months later, no one has done anything with it. But you don't know what's going to happen 3 months from now or 6 years from now, right? And it might just help someone. So the thing with it probably won't be useful to anyone. That's the least good reason for not sharing. So. Okay, well, thank you very much. And if you have any, if you think of any questions later or something, just tweet me.